Rerail is a $25 million angel fund or solo GP fund, predominantly backed by founders. So I'm backed by some of the best that have done it before, who can be an extension of my team to the founders I back. And with that, I do 200 to 500K checks at pre-seed, seeds globally, with a skew to Europe and UK still, into any company that can utilize fintech. So not just fintech, but the idea that fintech is increasingly horizontal, more and more companies can utilize that. So I try to be that complementary node that actually supports that. And so what's top of mind today, just to finish all your questions, I'd say all of what's happening in AI and how it's shaking the industry completely, and the implications of that, right? Like horizontal AI versus verticalized, implications of that for the future ways of monetizing in the future financial services, and also how to play the game in this market that's ever evolving, I'd say.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack him there. Yeah. I already want to jump in, if that's cool, and ask about you have a famous quote, everything is fintech. This is a famous investment thesis. You know, what you're telling us right now is you're trying to sort of balance your world with this sort of AI. Don't know if it's a bubble, don't know if it's like the next frontier of, human evolution, two very, very large ends of the spectrum. But your statement, everything is fintech, does this hold true in the world that we live in today? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think first of all, I wasn't the first one to coin that for sure. I don't want to take that credit, but I must say that, the idea that wherever payment, wherever there's commerce, wherever there's monetization flow, there's financial services, right? And financial services is horizontal as a result. Now, how I'm seeing that manifest itself actually is very pragmatic, bottoms up, which is there's still a lot of core fintech, which is what most people think when they think orthogonally about fintech. But there's also industries that are adjacent or where fintech can be an enabler. So think about health and insurance, or logistics and trade finance, or climate, where usually it intersects with financing or asset management, right? Then there's another bucket actually where I think traditionally was initially vertical SaaS. Now we're seeing also in vertical AI, where fintech can be a business model. So think about Toast, right? Service Titan, these types of businesses, right? Toast's annual revenue last year was, I think, 4.96 billion, if I'm not mistaken. 4 billion of that was financial services, right? So it's mainly payments and a bit of lending. And so again, fintech here is a revenue model, right? And then the final bit is where it can be a target customer. So huge categories like cybersecurity, right? They sell to regulated industries, to financial services, to fintech. And so when I say everything is fintech, I mean that increasingly fintech kind of has a prevalence kind of everywhere. And basically that's what I try to bring to the table with Rerail as well. Now, to today's world, I think there's both how AI is manifesting itself within financial services themselves. There's also how we're thinking about the future of commerce with AI and how financial services has a role to play there. So think about agentic payments and agentic commerce and all of what we've seen or started to see recently. Even the big schemes have made plays there, right? MasterCard and Visa. And then there's also verticalized AI, where if you think about it, most of the verticalized AI plays today, I'm doing AI for dentists, for healthcare. They usually play for being future systems of record, which means they interplay with billing and ERPs and all of that. So it's very indirectly fintech, but it's still something that touches on the financial stack as well. So that's kind of top of mind when it comes to that intersection.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Again, I want to unpack some more in here. You've sort of you mentioned these 200K to 500K checks. Is your predominant focus only sort of fintech adjacent startups globally? If you're seeing these cool AI, which is kind of trendy, these sort of trendy pre-seed startups pop up, is your investment thesis that I just have to ignore that, or will you have a look at it, or is it I just can't put a check in from this fund? Maybe do an angel check.
It's a very fair and very, very cool, good question. So the first thing I say is that I'm a pre-seed seed investor first and foremost. And I think, by the way, is why I believe being a specialist pre-seed seed fund is tricky. And that's why I don't consider myself as a specialist in terms of industry expertise, but I do believe as a micro fund and as a solo GP funds, our role is to complement rounds with a very specific value add. So the way I see what I do is like bottoms up. I need to meet the best of the best that are starting something new. That's today where there's a why now. It's something exciting, and that includes AI many times. And number two, it's about like finding whether what they're doing can benefit from fintech networks. And so my role as a solo GP should be I can bring a complementary value add to the lead VC, to the composition of a round, to other microfunds, and that complementary value is the fintech network. But the fintech network could be, oh, I'm trying to unlock talent, and like some of the best talent in Europe is locked into like scale-ups in fintech. Well, I know most of them, right? Or as loose as that, all the way to like, hey, at scale, I want to monetize like payments. Okay, I can do that. And so going back to what you said, in practical terms, the stuff that I usually don't have an intersection or the intersection is quite far-fetched are the very horizontal things. So the horizontal dev tools, productivity tools, AI, like horizontal AI is less of what I do, is more verticalized. And I would be lying to you if I'm not in this constant conundrum of like, the more horizontal AI you are today, the more you have the chance of being like a lovable, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, that has its pros and cons. Like nothing to judge on lovable is an amazing story. But what I'm saying is, verticalized AI also can spike, but in a different way. And so, yes, I'm capturing some of that, but I'm also not capturing some of that very horizontal plays. And I'm okay with that actually at the moment.
Very cool. I also wanted to ask about raising the funds. So you've raised a couple of funds yourself. Like, tell us, what's that like? How did you find it?
Yeah, actually, the two different experiences were actually very, very different because the first fund I raised with Carmen Coco was like in 2021, right? End of 2021. So like bull market like crazy. I think we had the experience of how it is to raise a momentum round as a founder. So like, we raised in like 2 to 3 months, what was like almost 3.5, 4 times the money we wanted.
Wow.
And that was both fund of funds and entrepreneurs. So it was crazy. And so that was a very different experience. I considered it an outlier. And it was a great formative experience to now I can identify with like founders where they're like, really battling with giving allocation to people and like that being a problem because you have to make ruthless decisions there on like being systematic on the decisions. Hey, I will cut everyone by that amount or I won't make room for these people because we ended up actually closing at like much lower the amount we actually had committed capital because we wanted to stay true to our strategy. The current market is completely the opposite, right? And so I unlearned and like relearned and assumed wartime CEO type of mentality when I went out to raise. But thankfully it went a bit faster than I thought, right? I did my first close just above the target. I think it was like five months after I started my raise. $25 million, which again, like it is a very tricky market. It's a very nuanced market. It feels like no one has the incentive to commit early. It also feels like you need to really have like a unique, like the why you kind of thing that we ask to founders. Why you, why now? I think is very important at this stage because you're fighting for incremental dollars that really matter. I do think though I benefited from three things. One is like I had already raised one fund, and so I've built relationships with institutionals. I've had existing relationships with entrepreneurs, and that really helps. I think the second is that I have a network that's very helpful and I'm grateful for, like, GPs in other big funds that I rate and others that just open doors and just helped. And I think the last bit, which I think really helped as well, is that I was kind of basically positioned as pitching something that I've proven once before in slightly different setting. So when you do a fund one, the hardest thing is you kind of have to prove everything. Like you probably have a track record, maybe on like being a partner or not in another fund. And now you have to prove, can you do the check size? Can you have the win rates? Can you become a manager versus a partner? Whereas I had proven a lot of those things and that was slightly morphing the strategy and refining and had to prove, like, not had to prove, but like had to actually convince people on me being solo versus two partners. And also the kind of slightly skewed everything is fintech thesis, let's say, on the why now.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And you mentioned something there, right? It is abundantly clear that you have enough skin in the game that you can kind of the barriers to entry aren't as low now as they maybe once were for you, right? You've proven your value, you've proven how well you can execute, and you've proven like how successful you can be. Now, the sort of the premise of Rerail is it's backed by other founders and operators, right? And when I say skin in the game, it's like because you have skin in the game, these founders and these operators trust you and they will back you. What's it like, working with a sort of, I guess it's a non-traditional LP, right? Like I guess you said mentioned it's a group of founders and operators. Can you move quicker with that sort of setup? Is it a bit more fluid? Can you sort of like trust your gut a bit more? How does that work? What's the kind of the comparison between the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I don't consider myself successful yet at all. So hopefully, like, we'll know in 8 to 10 years. But that's the game, right? It's very humbling and it takes a long while. And I'm grateful for the trust of people. The second thing I'd say is like, I actually have both, right? So like majority of my LP base is founders, but I also have institutional investors, whether it's family offices and LPs. So I can actually have the different experiences. And I will say, by the way, that both have their pros and cons. But if you get like the tier one or the good ones of both, they can be both really transformative, right? And so just to answer first your plain question, which is, in its purest form, having a founder as an LP, the con is like you don't know continuity, right? They don't know whether they are the types of people that want to commit to venture for like many funds for many years. If you want to scale your fund massively, probably you don't want to rely on them because then, it's not like suddenly they'll like, quadruple or, quintuple like their commits to your next fund. Maybe they just also not investing more in venture in the next fund. So that's the con, but everything else is a pro in my view because you turn your LPs into your largest assets. So like some of the founders and operators that are backing me, like they source for me some of the best talent that they know that leave their companies, other companies that come to them, their center of gravity, right? In this ecosystem. They also help me DD, right? Like, so when you meet a founder and you think a 1 in 1,000 founder, I think the best DD point you can have is from those industry experts. And a lot of them are my LPs, which is amazing. It also allows me to have a higher win rate. Like a lot of the founders that I'm meeting, the types of the people they want to have by their side are some of my LPs. And so like connecting them, to each other is actually a mutual benefit. And then the largest bit, which is the portfolio value add, like the value I try to bring to the table to a lot of the founders that I back is utilizing the Rerail Orbit. Rerail Orbit is LPs plus portfolio I have amassed over the years. And, that actually is quite a deep network in fintech. And so absolutely, I must say, though, that like traditional, more fund to funds and family offices, if there's some of the top, and I think I'm grateful I have some of them, they also can be very additive. So like family offices, for example, can give you really good access to traditional industry. So it's like I have great access to like, fintechs or to people in adjacent industries in the technology sector. Can I get access to the traditional industries? And usually if they're big families, they have really good access to that. And then fund to funds, like they help you think like a manager better. And they also can be very additive with their own networks, their own LPs. And actually, a lot of people, they say the cons are, but you might be slower. It might be more reporting. And I do believe like certain, like institutional LPs make you that. I think, quite grateful to have by my side people that just enable me. I was actually really surprised when I first closed the fund. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about reporting. Like, do you guys have any tips? And I was like dreading that they'll be like, hey, you should do these like big decks now. You have these fund to funds. And they were like, man, you're a solo GP. It should be on an email and it should be the TLDR. And that's like the institution. So beware of the ones that don't. And there's many that don't. But if you get the right ones, both have a really big role to play, I think.
It sounds like your superpower as a VC or an investor, solo GP, is your network, right? And it feels like lots of VCs have angles or different value adds. It feels like you've become an incredibly well-connected person in fintech, and that's taken what sounds like a decade. What advice would you give to somebody in any vertical or any industry within tech on how to build a network like you've built?
And thank you for that. And I'm funnily enough, I take a step back many times, and I'm like, I'm probably the least like good guy in building networks. Meaning, like, I've not made it a science, and I'm also not good in the sense of like, okay, I just took this call. Let me open up this list and think who's the best person to connect to, right? Like, I think I have much more roads to get to like making my network a science. I think, by the way, I'm using tools like Happenstance now. I don't know if you've come across them. You should. Like, they're just quick tools to make sure you're making the most out of your network. But the thing that really works for me, and by the way, as a solo GP, you're forced to do that because you don't have as much time to, let's say, you know, have hours and hours spent on like proactively thinking about your network, is just organically in your head finding ways to organically basically activate the network. What does that mean? So like when I meet a founder, I'm not like, okay, in my list, which part of the node of the network should I activate because I haven't talked to before much? It's not what I do. But what I do is like, okay, this company operates in like, you know, logistics and fintech space. Like, who do I know that I know would really love to actually see the next wave of great founders starting stuff in this industry where I actually can benefit from their DD and the founder can actually like really benefit from getting access to them having done stuff before in that space. And so I think that's the tip. It's like, we're in this industry where we're like just upside optimizing. We're all interest aligned more or less because it's so early where everything can go wrong. Find the organic ways in which you can interact and activate that network. I think that's the tip. And for me, that ends up becoming at point of DD, at point of like getting thoughts on a deal, at point of like adding value to my portfolio, and at point of winning deals, just having a compass of my network and understanding what are the passions of the different nodes of my network and what are their spikes, and then utilizing that to basically give value to myself, but more importantly, everyone else around. So it's like a cynical view of like, you got to have a vested interest to get value from it. But if you do it well, it actually is a win-win for everyone. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And look, we're running out of time, but one of the things we wanted to talk about was, you know, you've raised this fund, you're investing 2 to 500K. What does that deployment look like? How many deals are you trying to invest, and what's the time frame to deploy that capital?
Yeah, so it's the idea is I do it in 3 to 4 years. I said up to 4 years because I don't want to be in a rush, but at the same time, like it might as well become 3 years. That ends up being 25 to 30 investments, depending on how big or large, and I have a small reserve as well. But yeah, the idea is to do sub 8 a year. I do feel like that's for pre-seed seed, that's relatively concentrated, given stats. So that allows me, you know, to do fewer and build deeper relationships of trust. And I'm 1 year in, so I've done already a bunch, which is exciting.
Very cool.
Incredible. I mean, I guess that's time for today. But yeah, Anthony, it's been a pleasure having you on. We'd love to have you back. We'd love to keep hearing about what you're up to, new investments, whatever you've got going on. Come back to the show and
send your portfolio founders our way. You know, if they're announcing,
if they need to announce something,
like get them on. We'd love to have them on. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's chat about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love that.
Yeah. Announcements, you know, portfolio news. Let's talk about it.
I'll DM you on X, or maybe I have your email as well.
But like, thank you so much for coming on. We'd love to have you. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Anthony.